hopefully we've shown some light on the Ninth Circuit. I know that Chief Justice John Roberts, has been speaking a little bit about it, and I think and I have a lot of respect for him. I like him and I respect him, but I think we have to use some common sense. This Ninth Circuit, everybody knows it. It's totally out of control. And what they're doing, what they're saying, the opinions are very unfair to law enforcement. They can't believe the decisions that are being made by these judges.
President Trump expressing his frustration with parts of the federal judiciary on this Thanksgiving Day as he looks at the immigration laws, a pet project of his. Also, the president hinting at the possibility that the commander-in-chief could go visit the troops sometime soon. Thank
you very much for doing the job, and I'll see you back when you're in the United States, or maybe I'll even see you over there. You never know what's going to happen. I know what you have to do, and I've seen it in a lot of different forms, but I've seen the waters that you have to go through, and very few people could do it. It takes special people to do it.
Commander-in-Chief calling the troops and visiting with some Coast Guard folks in person. Let's bring in our panel. Michael Warren, senior writer at The Weekly Standard, Alex Wayne, White House editor for Bloomberg News, and Tom Rogan, commentary writer for The Washington Examiner. Tom, your thoughts on the commander-in-chief? He's not been to a war zone yet. What do you think? Is he going soon?
I think he is going soon. I think we will see that certainly before Christmas, but potentially even in the next couple of weeks. I think Afghanistan will be the natural place that he will go. And one of the interesting things with the president is that you do see, and we've obviously seen with Chief Justice Roberts, the tension about the separation of powers, the notion of constitutional powers. But the president earlier today as well was speaking to a naval officer who was talking about nuclear physics, oddly. And it was very striking to see, and this is where I think you see President Trump having a pretty good rapport with the military brass, the elites, the four-star generals, as well as the enlisted personnel, that he does have a deference to their expertise. I think he likes the fact that their job is to close with and destroy the enemy, personally. But at the same time, I think it is to the president's credit. He's at his best in a way with the military in the sense that he defers to better judgment, but he also has a respect for it, and he is willing to listen. And in that earlier discussion with the nuclear physics guy or the officer today, there was a disagreement, but he was like, well, okay, I sort of agree with you. You don't see that with other people. So I think the opportunity for the White House coming off the back of the midterms to go to a war zone is to say, actually, the president, as George W. Bush was to a degree, in the comfort zone.
Alex, we remember George W. Bush going to war zones on the holidays. President Obama made several visits. Yeah. Your thoughts on this president as our White House editor on the panel?
Well, it's puzzling he hasn't gone already. By this point in his presidency, Barack Obama had gone to Iraq once, he'd gone to Afghanistan once, and in just a couple of weeks, on December 3rd of 2010, Barack Obama went to Afghanistan for a second time. So it's not clear really why Trump hasn't gone yet. Jim Mattis has said he's advised him not to go to certain places, didn't name any of those places, but it suggests that perhaps things are maybe worse in Afghanistan than the public is really understands at this point, that it's just not safe enough for the president to visit.
And I think this gets to a sort of a complication with any trip for the president to a combat zone in the Middle East, which is that the president himself has stated his opposition to the United States military being involved in Afghanistan. He sort of was pulled kicking and screaming by his advisors to continue into our engagement in Afghanistan. And I think he's very frustrated with the way that has gone since he agreed to that South Asia policy as he did last year. The same in Syria fighting ISIS. I think he wants to be done and out of there. So would a trip to visit the troops there send a mixed message? Would it maybe be perceived as an endorsement? I think those are the kind of things that this very sort of public relations conscious president is thinking about. It's interesting to hear him tease that, but I'm skeptical that he's going to follow through.
What do you gentlemen make of the back and forth between the president and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? Michael, let's start with you.
I think he's certainly not the first president to grumble about a court ruling going against him and against his administration. I think what's different here is the public way that he's going about it and the personal way he seems to be taking this. That this is, he talks about this judge was appointed by a Democrat, or was appointed by Obama. And I think that's where you're getting Justice Roberts really kind of feeling like he has to defend the impartiality or rather the independence of the judiciary. That, look, we may be not dominated by presidents of a certain party, but at least ideally, we aren't that president's guy on the bench for the rest. And you do hear this. Neil Gorsuch, the president's first major accomplishment, getting him on the Supreme Court, very early on in his Supreme Court tenure, ruled against the president on an immigration issue. So you often see this where these judges rule against them. The president seems to take it too personally.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this president has upset so many norms and expectations that we had for the presidency before he took office, and one of those is in challenging institutions that his predecessors would never have so publicly challenged. The courts are one of them. The Federal Reserve is another example. He's repeatedly criticized the Federal Reserve and the chairman of the Fed personally for raising interest rates. You just didn't hear that from previous presidents, and it's taken some getting used to. I think there are some consequences to it. I think he risks shaking confidence in those institutions by criticizing them.
Tom, your thoughts?
Clearly, I think analytically you look at the traditional role of the judiciary in terms of the constitutional binding, separate but equal. Chief Justice Roberts had to stand up for the court. We all know that there are political ideologies that behind different judges, but at the principle there must be equal justice under the law. Chief Justice had to stand up for that. But again, it was quite striking today. President Trump, very presidential in an unusual sense for the president, in the sense quite normal, in the sense that he was, having this sort of disagreement politely with the naval officer. But he also said, Chief Justice Roberts, I respect the guy. There was no animosity that you normally see. And sometimes I think with Trump, it's almost like he's out on the yacht tweeting, and then he comes back into that moment and he thinks about it. As long as someone has the respect, you're the president, right? Doesn't make it personal. If you do that with the president, I think he listens more.
Okay, so in our brief time left in this segment, I want to briefly get to House Judiciary Republicans calling former Loretta Lynch, Attorney General, and James Comey up to the Hill. Briefly.
I think very briefly what they should have done, and what probably will happen ultimately, is you have an open and a closed session. There is some classified stuff there, some of it very classified because of foreign allies, but do both ways. I think Comey has a point, though, that there is some political agenda here. Just do both, open and closed.
Alex, your
As
thoughts?
a journalist, I'm a big fan of Jim Comey having a public hearing instead of a closed-door interview with those Republicans.
And if it's closed, there will be leaks from the Republicans and there will be leaks from the Democrats. Nobody will agree on what was actually said. I think that's a problem at getting clarity of what they're looking for.
Is it too late? Should they have done this before the midterms?
Yes, I think so. And look, I think Jim Comey doesn't do himself any favors by sort of getting out ahead of his lawyer's statement, making this tweet here. I think it ultimately makes him look a little petty, and the lawyer's statement should speak for itself.